Hello and welcome to another edition of the Town Administrators Update, our chance to talk with Town Administrator Paul Sagarino about different topics going on in the town of Burlington. Paul, thanks for joining us once again.
Thanks for having me, Rich. It's always a pleasure.
So one of the things I wanted to start with is sort of a big decision that was made last night, and that was the tax classification for fiscal year 2021. Can you just sort of talk about kind of what went into that decision and kind of where the selectmen came down?
Sure. As you're aware, the tax rate we set last night covers the town for all the spending that was approved at all the town meetings last year, starting in May. So it basically covers spending from this past July 1st through next June 30th. At the beginning of the year, we have a big discussion amongst departments and elected officials to sort of determine the spending level that we anticipate presenting to town meeting, and also a discussion of how much we will need to raise the tax levy in order to fund that budget. So on a good note, despite the situation with COVID, we were able to land on the 5%, 5.5% tax levy that we anticipated when we started the budget process pre-COVID. On a bad note, we did have to make some cuts, so it's not covering the same level of services. But at the end of the day, the values have been set. I think our town assessor, Jim Doherty, pointed out last night, residents should be aware that the values that this tax rate is based on is January 1st, this past January 1st, which was sort of a pre-COVID valuation date. And what the selectmen did with their vote was sort of determine how the tax levy is distributed between residential taxpayers and business taxpayers. And as everybody knows, because of the classification shift, our business taxpayers pick up a very large proportion of the tax levy to the benefit of the residents.
Right, and it's sort of every year it's sort of trying to make that balance between not putting too much of a burden on the residents, but also not trying to scare away businesses.
Yeah, without question. We're in competition against other communities. As businesses are looking to locate, one of the things they look for is the relative taxes that they'll be paying in that community. So we work really hard to keep the residents' share of it down. And I think the numbers roughly work out to that the business community pays 2/3 of the entire tax levy, property tax levy in the town, and the residents pay 1/3. And believe it or not, most people probably feel that we have more business property than we do residential, but it's exactly the opposite relationship. We're actually about 60% residential value within the town and 40% commercial value. So 40% commercial value pays 60% of the tax dollars. It's really a great relationship. It's really what makes Burlington tick. And again, the development of the budget and the setting of the tax rate is really difficult for us. When you think of developing a budget for 25,000 different folks within the town, people with different wants, different needs, different ability to pay, it's really one of the most challenging things we do all year long, trying to balance out all those different interests and try to be as fair to as many of the residents as possible as we go through that process. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And looking ahead to next year, I know there was some talk last night about, maybe using some stabilization funds to lower the tax burden. Probably too late in the game right now for that, as of last night. But looking ahead to next year, what kind of considerations are going to have to be made as far as, set, the budget? I know that's when everyone expects sort of, the real difficulties to begin.
Right. I think we've been saying all along that we got through this current fiscal year. We hope to be able to get through it relatively unscathed. We did make $2.1 million in cuts already, but we've said from the beginning that 2022 is probably going to be the most difficult year for us. On 2022, in addition to the actual slowdown in the local economy and the revenues that we have coming in from meals tax, from hotel tax, from building permits, which are all, as everybody would expect, way down, we'll also be dealing with sort of a difficult situation on the values. Commercial values, just based upon what's going on in business, are likely to be stagnant
Yeah.
And, we're in a situation where our residential housing market is still doing extremely well. So the system that we base our taxes on works really well if both properties are classifications of property are moving in the same direction. But it becomes a little bit more challenging when commercial values are dropping and residential values are increasing. That puts us in a situation where potentially the residents could face more of the tax burden going forward, and that's a big concern of ours.
Right, and I know the direction of the board, as you acknowledged last night, is to really try to keep taxes as low as possible.
Without a doubt, 2022, everything is going to be on the table. I think in our thoughts and our planning, we understand that we've held off on utilizing our reserves, understanding that 2022 would be the year where we might want to do something like that. And we're always looking out for every way we can to help the residents and keep the taxes down. But it's still a move that's not without risk. When you use reserves to fund the budget, you already start off the following year with a shortfall of whatever amount of reserves you use to fund the budget. So
Right.
It sort of puts you in a recurring situation where, once you start using it, sometimes it becomes difficult to move away from. But again, 2022 will have to consider things like that, which we haven't had to do over the past several years.
And in some, switching topics a little bit into something a little bit more positive, there was a good update from DPW Director John Sanchez last night about the connection to the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority, or MWRA. Talk about how that project stands.
Sure. And let me just state that we're not hooked up to the MWRA yet, so please continue to be conservative with your water use. I like to say that to the residents and the businesses. Quite a process we went through on the regulatory end. We dealt with state agencies that I've never heard of before to go through this process. Water Resources Commission basically was the biggest part of the process, the biggest hurdle to get into the MWRA. That we received a positive vote from them last week. What they're essentially is approving is our ability to take water from the Quabbin Reservoir and use it here in Burlington. So they take into account a lot of different things in terms of how the water would have a negative impact on our environment and things of that nature. It was really a very rigorous process that we went through, public hearings here as well as out in Western Massachusetts. We were finally able to come to an agreement, and we got a positive vote from them. We still have a couple more votes from the MWRA itself to allow the town in. But just in summary, phase one of the project was a connection on Adams Street for 1 million gallons a day. That connection has been built. We're not using it yet because we're not approved to use it. So with the $1 million, 1 million gallons a day will allow, pretty much John Sanchez to sleep a little bit better at night. As you're aware, the reason why we're in this predicament is we lost a couple of wells due to contamination of about 1 million gallons a day. So the phase one pipe connection will solve a short-term problem and give us a little bit of breathing room. But we're also in the process of designing what we call phase two of the project, which is actually the town's own line, which will run from Burlington to an MWRA hookup in Arlington. And that line, phase two, will have the capacity to support all the town's water needs going forward. So if our intention is to continue making our own water at the Mill Pond plant, but if we need to shut that plant down for maintenance, we'll be able to get all of our water through the phase two pipe. So we're still a couple years away from the permanent solution, but we're hopeful that within a month or so, we should have the short-term solution taken care of with that 1 million gallons a day through the Adams Street connection.
Absolutely. And you say we're a couple of years away from that more permanent solution, but that couple of years is still sooner than was originally anticipated.
Correct. We really working hard to accelerate that project. There's a tremendous demand, obviously, from the residents to solve the water situation, as well as our business community. As you know, we're fully involved in trying to attract life science businesses to the community, and they really need high quality water, which we will have extremely high quality water suitable for manufacturing and research and lab type uses with our MWRA connection. So.
Excellent. And just a couple of last things. Another decision that was made last night was the Board of Selectmen may not be called the Board of Selectmen anymore.
Yeah, that's correct. The board and I have been working on this since last January. We were thinking of doing it last May. As everyone is aware, that wasn't a traditional town meeting, so we ended up pulling the article at that time. But last night, the board voted to switch the names to the Select Board. That's a change that's gone on in many communities in Massachusetts over the past few years. And, the board supported it. We had some lively discussion on sort of what to change the name to. Some people had suggested maybe town council or executive board, but ultimately, again, I made the plea as a sort of a boring person with an accounting background to sort of go with sort of the name that the other communities are switching to. Allows us to still keep select in the title, which I think is somewhat historical and native here to Massachusetts. So, I'm glad that we're going to move forward. We still have a bunch of committees to move that through and ultimately to town meetings. So we're looking forward to that initiative that, many of our other neighboring communities have done over the past few years.
Very good. And last thing is just anything else coming up that you're looking at for January town meeting that, you think, would be of significance or interest to people?
We're still, again, due to the way that we've had to have the virtual town meetings, we're trying not to make the meetings overly onerous at this point in terms of subject matter. So we're trying to be diplomatic and work with the moderator to really try to bring forward the most important initiatives. So as of this point, we have received a few zoning type issues for inclusion on the January warrant, but in terms of financial or other type matters, the due date is until December 11th, so we should know more about that in the upcoming weeks.
All right. Well, very good. I, once again, appreciate you taking some time to talk with us and sort of bring everybody up to date on what's going on.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Rich. I appreciate our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.